After nearly a year in space, NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei and two Russian cosmonauts are back on Earth. There's the touchdown right there in central Kazakhstan. The Russian Soyuz rocket undocked from the International Space Station early this morning and landed in Kazakhstan. They returned home at a time, of course, of high tensions between their respective countries over the war in Ukraine. But some history nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. Vande Hei's 355 days on board the International Space Station is the longest single space flight by an American astronaut. So really cool, despite the backdrop, obviously, with what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. But really exciting stuff to have him back.
Let's bring in retired NASA astronaut and former International Space Station commander Leroy Chow joining us from Houston. Leroy, thank you so much. Let's just talk about this history-making moment here by Mark Vande Hei. What's going through your head as you're coming down in a capsule like that? He's been weightless in space for nearly a year.
Right. So obviously the crew was very excited to be coming back. They wrapped up a very successful mission. And so, one more task, and that is a successful landing, which we just saw. And so, at this moment, they're still laying on their backs, and so they're not feeling particularly dizzy or uncomfortable. But once they stand up, that's when they're going to feel really dizzy.
Are you a little wobbly when you try to get up after that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Even after a short space shuttle mission of a week or two, you definitely still have those same effects. They go away a lot more quickly after a short flight. The long duration flight, it's a little more intense and it takes a little longer to readjust.
Can you imagine what a year would be like?
Oh my gosh, I know. And this may be a silly question, but I know my ears pop when I'm on an airplane. So how is it painful when you come back and you actually touch down on Earth with your ears in particular?
Actually, the spacecraft is maintained at 1 atmosphere, so you don't get that popping effect. Commercial airliner, the pressure is usually maintained at about 8,000 foot pressure, and so you do equalize the spacecraft before touchdown. You're still pretty high up, so you do have to kind of equalize your pressure eventually. But you're in your spacesuit or your pressure suit. You've got your visors closed, and so you don't have that same effect as on a commercial airline.
Because that is annoying. Okay.
No kidding. Let's talk about the actual mission itself.
Yeah.
What type of information are NASA and the Russian Space Agency gathering from these long-term space flights?
Long-duration flights, the primary purpose or the primary experiments that we do aboard the ISS are physiological. So the cosmonauts will take a lot of measurements on themselves. Samples are sent back. And what we're trying to do is understand and figure out what we call biomedical countermeasures on how to keep astronauts and cosmonauts healthy on a long-duration spaceflight in preparation for a voyage to Mars. So that's why most missions are around 6 months in duration, because that's what we would expect one way when the planets are aligned to go either from the Earth to Mars or Mars back to Earth. So we're collecting data. We're testing countermeasures, which include exercise, of course, and pharmaceuticals and other things, just to figure out how we can keep astronauts healthy for that hopefully upcoming Mars mission.
Right, and it was so cool to see that video that we had playing just now. So since they launched into space, obviously we've seen tensions between Russia and the U.S. escalating pretty significantly given the war in Ukraine. How does that affect their ability to work together with respect to the space programs?
Well, fortunately, as we saw today, it hasn't materially affected the partnership. What is concerning, of course, is the head of Roscosmos, the director, Dmitry Rogozin, is a political appointee, of course, a very close ally of President Putin. And so he is the first and only director of the space agency to openly threaten the partnership, and there were veiled and not so veiled threats about leaving Mark Vande Hei in orbit. There were, kind of these images of separating the Russian segment from the American segment of the ISS, which really is not practical. I'm sure his technical advisors told him, hey, we really can't do this. And so it's, fortunately, we've seen cooler heads prevailed, and the partnership survives. No hitch at all. No question that Mark Vande Hei was coming down on today's spacecraft.
Is that something that ever comes up, just political situations, what's happening with conflicts around the world between, you're working with your Russian counterparts essentially up there on something that seems totally independent from anything that could be happening down on Earth, but it's tough to ignore, it would seem.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Of course, everybody on board knows each other very well, been training together, and in many cases for years together. So you know each other very well. You become good friends. And just like your friends here on Earth, you can have differing opinions on different political things that are going on. You can discuss them. Sometimes it can get even a little bit heated, but at the end of the day, you're still friends and you still respect each other's opinions. And so part of training in each other's countries is you develop that perspective to understand the other side's viewpoint and why it might be different. Doesn't mean you necessarily agree, but at least you can understand each other, and that helps a lot. So there's no tension on board. The professionals on the ground, it's the same. The flight controllers in Moscow and Houston, very strong friendships between those two groups, and very great working relationships, the engineers and everyone involved. All professionals on all sides, making sure that these space flights are as safe as possible.
So that 355 days that Vande Hei was up there is seems pretty significant. Can you just talk about how big of a deal that is?
Yes, that's a very long time. My mission to the ISS many years ago, just before launch, a few months before launch, there was a possibility that we would have to fly for a year, basically to accommodate a tourist taking our return seats. And fortunately, that didn't come about. But, we were like, whoa, because we were training with the expectation of a 6.5-month flight. we would have accepted a year-long flight. But, a year's a lot. It's a lot of time to spend up there. 6.5 months is already a lot of time. And it has to do with your mental preparation. As long as you know what you're getting into and you set your expectations, it's okay.
So recently, 3 cosmonauts wore yellow spacesuits in the International Space Station. Who chooses what cosmonauts wear during their missions in space, and how could that choice be interpreted?
Yeah, so when the 3 latest cosmonauts arrived at the ISS, their flight suits were orange in color with some blue striping on it, and people, of course, speculated what that meant. The crew does choose their clothing, but this is done months in advance, and so the selections would have been made much before the current invasion of Ukraine. And so, coincidence or not, these colors also happen to be the colors of the university where all 3 cosmonauts graduated from.
Oh, okay.
And of course, they made a kind of a little bit of a joke when asked about the colors of their flight suits by Roscosmos. Their reply was, well, there's a lot of yellow material left, so our flight suits are yellow.
I was about to speculate and say, would it have anything to do with Ukraine?
I know.
It was like staring at, but that school.
I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of cosmonauts that are not pro-war, who oppose the war, but of course they're smart enough that they know where they live and they can't openly say anything. And I don't know. It's possible it was kind of a lucky coincidence that it turned out to be making a statement of some kind, maybe in a subtle way. But like I said, these selections are made months before the flight, and so it was long before the war started.
Yeah. So they landed. Obviously, what happens the rest of the day? What are they doing?
So they'll be out of the capsule pretty quickly. It takes about 20 minutes or so for the crew that lands in the helicopters to come over and get the hatch open. They'll set them down in lawn chairs and let them relax for a few moments. Give them a quick look over, and give them the satellite phone so they can call their families and tell them they're safe. And they'll do a quick medical check, and then get them out of their suits, do a quick medical check, and then get them on the airplanes to go back to Star City.
Wow, very cool.
Pretty cool moment there. Leroy Chiao, retired NASA astronaut and former International Space Station commander. Thank you so much for your time and your insight, sir. We appreciate you coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.